You are listening to the Casting Shadows Podcast. And this episode is the next installment in our RPG A Day 2023 responses. It will cover the prompts from day 11 through to day 20. At its core, RPG A Day is a daily, not exactly challenge, not exactly marathon, but not those things either. A daily encouragement to share positive experiences, positive observations about our hobby, role-playing games. I've been doing daily posts at the blog. That's CastingShadowsPodcast.com. Here, we've been compiling them. We started with the first 10 posts at the beginning of the challenge and let it go for a while just to allow me the time to focus on what other people are saying. Just following the hashtag. All the posts should be hashtagged RPG A Day 2023, so a simple click can bring you a variety of responses in different forms and different media from people you've never heard of, and it's pretty cool. So if you haven't tried that, I suggest it. If you like what you find, please let the original poster know that you were there and what you thought about their post. And if you thought it was really cool, then please share it far and wide with your own friends. Anyway, what I post here on the podcast will sometimes be the same as what is appearing on the blog, but not always. So let's get into it. If by some weird quirk of fate, this is your first exposure to an RPG A Day response, what's going on is that David Chapman and I release an infographic filled with 31 questions. Or sometimes 31 single-word prompts. This year, it's a combination. We have kind of a simple question to answer, or a single word in bold from which you can take inspiration and produce your response for the day. And you can take it in any direction that you want, that you enjoy, that expresses positivity about role-playing games. So in the first 10 responses, we have things like the word first, or game master, or recent, or never, or character, things like that. The prompt for day 11 is weirdest. And the question is the weirdest game that you've played. On the Casting Shadows blog, I answered that question, the weirdest game that you've played. So I think for my response here for day 11, we'll just look at the single word prompt, weirdest. On the blog, I mainly talked about system, and I defined weirdness as outside of my normal expectations, something I never would have expected to encounter, right? Oh, that's weird. Not a negative, not a pejorative. A reaction of, wow, I never would have thought of that in a million years. Turning that around a little bit, there have been games, the systems for which have been inside my expectations, not challenging me in that way, but the content for which comes kind of seemingly out of left field. Not in the, what, you made a game out of that kind of, dismissive way, but in the, wow, you were able to make a game out of that kind of thing, or you have the skill to be able to tie this into a vision that you're able to communicate through the written word on the page and transmit to a stranger. And I have a lot of admiration for that. So we've got amazing games to pick from, like Over the Edge, or Dialect. Now, if you've not heard of these two games, Over the Edge is kind of a surreal conspiracy noir kind of, not fantasy in terms of dragons and sword fighting, but fantasy in terms of the dreamlike state of it. Or Dialect, which is a role-playing game largely built around the idea of creating and guiding a language from its birth to its death, with role-playing in between. Pretty weird, right? Pretty unusual. While we might look at Over the Edge and say, well, that's not all that weird. I mean, lots of games are like that. There is a specifically unsettling nature to Over the Edge and the kind of the purpose of playing Over the Edge, where if you can play it and not find yourselves rubbing shoulders with weirdness, you might be playing it poorly. And Dialect, well, I mean, who would have thought, right, that when you're sitting down to play a role-playing game, that you have these dual purposes going on. Yes, you're going to have characters, and yes, they're going to be doing cool things, and yes, you're going to bring in genre elements, but through it all is this thread of language, and as the game says it, language and how it dies. Pretty weird. And in these cases, weird's cool. Day 12 has the highlighted prompt, still. And the question is, old game you still play? And in our hobby, there's kind of an ambiguity between game and system, right? Take Space 1889, for example. Which system do you play the game with? Or is it all just the game? So, for me, when I think about this, the first thing that comes to mind, the game that comes to mind, and I explore this in a completely different way on the written blog, but the answer is still kind of the same. The game that comes to mind is Call of Cthulhu. And my conception of this question is that this is a game that's in regular rotation. It's not just a game that I own that's old, that I'm familiar with, that I could run. It's a game that I regularly run as part of the normal rotation of whatever games that I go through. So we know that I run a lot of games using Ubiquity, whether they are official releases or whether they're my own settings that I've put together to apply the system to. Likewise, Mithras as kind of the extreme version of BRP, which powers Call of Cthulhu. You can expect that there's either some gameplay going on in my life that uses Mithras, or we're playing one of the many BRP games, RuneQuest or Worlds of Wonder or Pendragon or something, right? We're using some aspect of it. Probably Call of Cthulhu. So the game that I'm still playing is a system. I find that kind of interesting. How some of these older games have grown beyond their initial conception and become a launching point into the application of system, into the expression of your own ideas or your reinterpretation of ideas. And sometimes we get on board with like official releases of new editions, and sometimes we find that they don't connect with us, or sometimes we find that we can pick certain aspects of them and blend them in with what we have come to think of as the system and the way that we want to use the system. It's kind of interesting. Now, most of the games that I play, I really enjoy being able to have all the editions of them on my shelf and play the one that's the best fit for the idea and the group. Sometimes, however, I find my appreciation stops at a certain point or starts at a certain point in the development of the system and setting and, relation of the genre and whatnot as it goes. So I find it really kind of interesting. Do I think of the game as one continuous element or one continuous product from its first edition through its whatever current edition it is? Is that all the game, right? And because it started so long ago, it's an old game. Or if an edition of it was released yesterday, has it somehow gained new life and it's now a new game or a new version of the game? I like these ideas. But my answer to the question is Call of Cthulhu. It's always ready to go, whether I'm playing it as Call of Cthulhu or as Delta Green or as my own version of Mythos Mithras or whatever. Clockwork and Cthulhu, anyone? The question for day 13 is the most memorable character demise. And the single word prompt for today is demise. Now, I answered in a roundabout fashion the character demise question long, long ago in the past. And in different versions of this question that David and I have released in subsequent RPG-A-Days. So this time, I'm going to look at demise. And there is this notion that role-playing games can be unsupported, that there can be dead games. And this is a thing that we see a lot of pushback against, and I'm kind of on the side of that pushback. There's only one way for a role-playing game, a printed role-playing game that you hold in your hands as a book that you can read. There's only one way for that to truly die, and that's if we let those books fall into decay, if we don't share how to play, if we don't share our enthusiasm for those games, if we don't share the culture of play that arose playing those games, if we're not a part of their preservation and transmission to the next group of eager gamers who will love them as much as we did if they just get the opportunity to hear about them. If we're not a part of the solution, then we are a part of the problem. There aren't games really that die. There are games that we let die, or dare I say, we kill. And that doesn't sound very positive at all, does it? So we really need to get out there and make sure that we can pass on our love for one of these fading or lesser known games before someone out there on the internet thinks that they're dead. Now, day 14 in the original 2014 edition of RPG A Day was the beginning of a block of posts in the very center of the infographic, which focused on the period of time where Gen Con ran in that year. And the original solo host of RPG A Day, David Chapman, could not go and definitely wanted like so many of us, to be able to attend that year. Well, 10 years later, Gen Con's over already this year. And so this is kind of a legacy section. So there are a number of prompts that tie into conventions, and the highlighted single word prompt for today is convention. Now, I've lived in Korea for more than a quarter century now, and there aren't gaming conventions really for me to attend. And even prior to coming here, I lived in a part of the world where there weren't that many either, and they didn't really become all that big until after I had left. I've attended a few. So I didn't really have a lot of attachment to the notion of conventions, and I've gone back and forth over the idea of them. So I can't answer the actual question today, favorite convention purchases. I've never purchased anything at a convention. However, when I think about conventions themselves, especially the more time passes, and the older I get, the more games that I play, the more games that I see kind of disappear from conversation. And as more trends in gaming of how to play arise and vie for dominance out there, and how as the new voices to the hobby grow in number to dwarf the older or original or middle-aged voices in the hobby, there is now currently at this point a greater risk of different ways to play, different games to play, different approaches to play, different attitudes about play, different cultures of play. There's a danger of a lot of these things disappearing because of our silence, as we talked about in the previous day's prompt. And it's at conventions where we can break that silence, where we can offer people insight into how things were done and why things were done. So before fears and rumors fester into facts about what things must have been like, they can instead be direct experiences of how things were. And if we're open to communicating with people, they can be conversations about why things were done a certain way and good methods for getting into doing them that way. And so that gaming can continue to expand and build on good ideas that people enjoy, rather than being stuck in a loop of creation and recreation, invention and reinvention over and over and over again, as if it's innovation rather than an ability to evolve and derive. So for me, conventions are a tremendously hopeful place where the generations can connect, where different designers can connect, where different groups of players can connect, and through their interactions really keep the hobby alive. Day 15, almost to the halfway mark. Day 15 is another one of our convention questions, and it's talking about the notion of adventures. The single word prompt for today is module or one shot, but the idea is, what is your favorite convention adventure, right? This is an experience question, whether you are a game master who has run it or you're a player who has played in it. What is one of those things that you think is ideal to experience or run at a convention, or is one of your favorite memories of having run or experienced as a player at a convention? Well, this is one of the questions in the convention series that I'm able to answer because long, long ago we hosted one of the early online, fully digital gaming conventions. And I've already talked several times about the Pork Chop Express and the Convoy of Liberty. If you're curious about that, you can take a look for it on the YouTube channel. So instead, today I'll talk about my favorite horror adventure designed for a convention. And this was called Death, Where Is Thy Sting? And it was done for Leagues of Gothic Horror, a Ubiquity-powered horror game from Triple Ace Games. So I came up with Death, Where Is Thy Sting for one of the EtherCon online conventions. The premise was of adult children being summoned back to their original home to deal with the death of their father. And one of the things that they were wrestling with as they arrive was a curious sense that much of their childhood had been forgotten. And as they explored the house, different memories began to intrude, along with some more horrible realizations. It was a lot of fun to play, partly because of how much enjoyment I derive from using the system for horror, but mainly because of the mix of personalities present. We laughed. We had a certain amount of chill and trepidation. I liked it. It was good. Definitely one of my favorite things. I've run it multiple times, both in preparation for the convention and afterward. So, if you're curious about that, you can also find it on my channel. All right, day 16. Now we're at and slightly past the halfway point. Day 16 brings us the prompt, what is a game that you wish you owned? And wish is our highlighted prompt. Game you wish you owned. Well, over the years, I have been, let's say, diligent, dedicated to trying to track down the specific games that I wanted. I managed to get a copy of The Riddle of Steel in fantastic condition, for example. I managed to get a complete box set, including dice for Ringworld. I got the Ringworld Companion, which is even harder to get. I got the Indiana Jones games. There's lots of things that I've managed to get into my library. Some which, by pure luck, were easy, and some which took years of searching and whatnot. On the blog, I gave one particular answer, which is Marvel Superheroes, right? The Marvel Superheroes role-playing game from TSR. This is a game I have never owned. I've only been in the same room with this game once. And while I would like to give another answer for variation for the podcast for people who are reading both, I just can't. I'm really quite satisfied with my old games collection. You know, my original copy of Gangbusters and my first edition of Pendragon and all the different editions of Call of Cthulhu and so on and so forth. All these complete series of core books that I've managed to assemble, yet this thing has continued to slip through my fingers. If you'd like more detail about my desire for this game, you can find that on the written blog. But just, feel with me for a moment at this huge gaping hole that bright yellow box, in its absence, has left in my library. Day 17 is about humor. Funniest game you've played, or tell us about one of the funniest games you have ever played. Generally speaking, when I approach this question, I tend to think about telling a story of play, a funny thing that happened, or sharing a video of a particularly funny session where the mix of personalities and the game and the setting and the genre, whatever, all conspired to create humor. And that's what I'm going to do here for this podcast episode. And it's what I did on the written blog, but I gave a different link than I'll be giving you listeners. Now, for those of you who follow the podcast, earlier in the back catalog, there are audio recordings of the sessions that I ran with the Ubiquity role-playing system, which are called Skyriders of Venus. It's a very pulpy kind of Sword and Planet, kind of off-the-cuff, improvised setting that we've played a couple of sessions of, and always gets us laughing. It's high adventure, high ideals, square jaws and righteous fists against evil kind of thing, with a lot of cool kind of Sword and Planet technology thrown in. So that kind of rich, bright-colored environment definitely gets us in an upbeat mood, and then the jokes and the funny character interactions fly. And so I will share that as a link in the show notes. But you can also find the videos of these sessions on the YouTube channel. If you do a search on YouTube for Runeslinger and add Sky Riders of Venus to that, you will come up with 2 separate adventures that we ran. They're complete in and of themselves, and I hope that you enjoy them and laugh along with us. Day 18 asks us to think about what is one of our favorite systems. This is a question that I've answered a lot just because of having a blog and doing YouTube videos and things like that. I've been asked that a lot and answered that a lot. And then as part of RPG A Day, over the various years, something akin to this kind of question has been in rotation as part of the special character of RPG A Day. And in particular this year, 2023, it's been a particular theme I notice in my own responses. It's something I'm thinking about lately, thinking about system a lot lately. So I think people who are familiar with me are expecting some kind of answer like Ubiquity or BRP or what's now called Genesis, which, if you're not familiar with Genesis, kind of got its beginning in Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition, then was refined for Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars role-playing, and then became more or less generic system called Genesis. All right, so these systems, they're in rotation a lot in my play, part of my examples, part of my conversation, part of my identity as a gamer. One of my favorite systems to talk about is Ubiquity. One of my favorite systems to talk about is basic role-playing. One of my favorite systems to talk about are all the D100 derivatives of basic role-playing, such as the amazing Mithras. How does a person pick what is one of your favorite systems? So while I have an unusual answer on the written blog, let's follow the highlighted prompt. System, as you might expect, and use that for this podcast entry. System. In order for a system to move into position as one of my favorites, the community aspect is important. Do the people that I'm regularly playing with, do they get excited about this system like I do? They don't need to have the same reason to be excited about it that I do, but that excitement is supportive and it's one of the aspects of contagion that is particularly useful in maintaining momentum and getting games played. We want to see what some aspect or what many aspects of the system are like. So this is an essential thing, that one of us can bring a game and say, hey, I'm really excited about this. It's like this. And we listen and we read and we find our own things to be excited about, or we find that we're excited by the same things and we get the game into play. That's hugely important. Another aspect of system which is important in generating that excitement, that enthusiasm, the willingness to talk about it and share it with other people is that, these days especially, that it either clearly is set up to help you support whatever it is that you want to do in that generic sense, right? It has an array of tools and mechanisms that you can envision using for a specific purpose. Or it has a very clear and specific, clear-cut identity. This is what this system does. Don't bother trying to do something else with it because it's going to fight you or it's going to let you down. It's going to be completely absent when whatever it is you're trying to apply it to comes calling. I find these days, currently, last year or so, I've been more excited by games that have that very refined and specific nature, which is quite a deviation from how I have felt about things in the past, where I've more been keyed to larger genres and wanting to explore by virtue of a more generic system or by a variety of games that solve elements of that genre on a system level using similar logic, even though they might be using different mechanisms, right? I've been focused more on running horror games or running pulp games and calling on one system to be applied to them and adjusted accordingly, or calling on multiple systems that have their own answers for the different things that I might require. That's been how things have been. But these days, I'm more attracted to games that have been specifically prepared for a very specific and defined expression of the genre. Find that interesting. And I fully expect the pendulum to swing back the other way at some point. So when I think about favorite systems these days, they're the ones that are specifically targeted at a particular job and that can spark that sense of excitement and the desire to investigate, the desire to experience in the whole group. Day 19. What is one of your favorite published adventures? Let's do something that's utterly ridiculous for a podcast. Raise your hand if you think my answer for the podcast will be different from my answer presented on the written blog. I'll wait. All right. Yes, I have decided to choose differently because I can. One of my favorites. So I've got an answer on the blog and I've got an answer here. Long, long ago, when the current edition of the Star Wars role-playing game was the West End Games D6 version, there appeared an adventure, a published adventure, which was called Black Ice. And this is one that I managed to buy. Black Ice. And while I can't say that I've ever run the whole thing, I can say that it has inspired more role-playing in my various Star Wars campaigns down through the years, including the various ones I've run for Fantasy Flight Games, than probably any other published adventure that I have owned or read. It is extremely inspirational for me. Everything about the setup just gets me thinking. I can think about all kinds of campaign ideas to use it with or in, or to start with Edge of the Empire, or Age of Rebellion, or Force and Destiny, or whatever else I want to do with Star Wars. There are so many things that this allows me to consider. It opens up. It does exactly what I think a published adventure module should do, and that's inspire. Now, whether that inspires you to present play in a particular way as you follow it through from its start to its conclusion, or whether it just is whispering in your ear saying, hey, you could do this, and you go, well, that's a good idea, but I'm going to do this instead. Doesn't matter how it inspires you. I don't care about that, but I care that it will. I don't think that running a published adventure should be challenging once you have developed the skill of using them, right? Of tying your preparation for improvisation into having that as one of your inputs. Right? Once you get comfortable with your process of using published adventures, I think that they should be there as a positive influence on what happens in gameplay. So for me, the most inspirational yet least used in total adventure module has been Black Ice. I just think it's fantastic. The last of these combined prompts for this episode is day 20. RPG a day, 2023, day 20. What will you still be playing in 20 years? There's a lot of ways to interpret this particular prompt. The singular word in bold is 20, and that's open up to an incredible amount of ideas. The question itself, the original question was, will still play in 20 years' time? So we've seen answers like, will you still be playing in 20 years' time? And well, I hope so. This year marks my 40th anniversary as a gamer. And unlike many people, I haven't taken a break, so I've been playing for 40 years. So that builds a certain amount of momentum, I think. I'll probably still be going, if I'm able, in 20 years' time. And game that I'll still be playing, there are no games that I have been playing for 40 years, but there are games that I've been playing for around 30 years, more than 30 years. I'm just not exactly sure. 32, 33 years, somewhere like that. They've been in regular rotation for all of that time, such as Call of Cthulhu, such as, Star Wars. So, it's not unreasonable to suspect I'll still be playing those games 20 years from now. But there are games that I played with extreme dedication, day after day, literally day after day, for a decade, and then basically stopped, almost cold turkey. So there's at least a chance that I will find something else to sink my teeth into, or find a different expression of what I love. And this, the normal unpredictability of the future is kind of exciting, right? The potential for new discovery. That I will still be playing, if possible, I think is as close to certain as we can assess as human beings. But what I'll be playing, how I'll be playing it, who I'll be playing it with, I hope I get my wishes in that regard, but we'll see what happens. And we'll be open to the new lessons it brings. So, Responses for day 21 to 31 will be, if not the next episode on the Casting Shadows podcast, it will be, somewhere toward the end of the month. It might be the next episode. Who can say? But there are episodes in the pipeline. Now, let's say you've listened to this episode or someone else's episode. Let's say you've drifted by the Nerds RPG Variety Cast for his combined posts, or the Arcane Alienist who's recently returned to the microphone and is warming up with RPG a day and also doing combined posts in the form of 2 or so a day. It's kind of convenient. Or maybe you've been over to Hindsightless, where almost every day there have been posts maintaining a furious pace of high energy and positivity. Or maybe you've swung way out over in New Zealand and heard the combined posts from Jules from NZ. Or maybe you've been reading blog posts such as being put out by Roleplay Rescue. Or you've been on YouTube and seen Uncle Riotous releasing daily prompts. And I think this is the year that he makes it all the way through all 31 prompts. What do you think? Anyway, maybe all of this kind of activity has inspired you. Maybe you think, I can be like the GMologist and I can share my experiences with role-playing games and, connect with people all over the world, sharing some part of my culture of play and my enthusiasm for play. Maybe I can be like Ivan Mike, 1968, and cheerfully go through day by day, or at least almost every day, and find something new and compelling to kind of forge a unique response out of, in a way, a generic prompt. Well, if you want to participate, you can head to my blog, CastingShadowsBlog.com, or you can head to David Chapman's blog, theautocratic.com, where the final C is a K. You can find the infographic there. You can find all of the very few instructions about posting, such as using the hashtag, being positive, and responding in whatever way suits your creativity and mood and favorite social platform and all of that stuff. Right? It's not too late to join in. It's a marathon or a challenge only in the sense that might be fun for me or for you. The more important point is the positivity, the connection, the sense of community, and the very real fact that these posts get explored later. They come up in searches. They appear after the fact. They become that rabbit hole down which somebody descends. And by their nature of expressing our enthusiasm for the hobby, they are contagious. So, if that sounds like something that you want to be a part of, jump in. There's lots of time left to have lots of responses shared. All right, that's it. That wraps up this installment of combined posts for RPG a Day for 2023. As I've mentioned numerous times throughout this episode, you can find daily releases at the Casting Shadows blog. I have not had the time that I need for what I have planned for the YouTube channel, but it's coming. It's in motion. I'll let you know about that possibly soon. So, RPG a Day 2023 is going. If you search for RPG a Day 2023, you'll find lots of responses in lots of different languages from lots of different places and different people. It's pretty cool. Or follow the hashtag. If you are participating, please do remember to use the hashtag. They may be going out of favor, but they are extremely useful, right? Wherever it is or however it is that you are posting. And please, if you can, remember, if you come across someone who's posting and it seems like, especially if it seems like nobody has read what you just read, let them know something positive about it, right? We are sharing our personal and private thoughts about what we love about role-playing games. And sometimes, especially those of us who are older and remember a time when it wasn't socially acceptable, when it was actively being, suppressed or repressed by large portions of society. We remember a time when we wondered if we were the only one, or if our small group of gamers would ever just be able to play without being harassed or bothered or whatever. So, like, share, comment on the RPG a Day posts that you find, and that would be awesome. But anyway, until the next time, take care.